Okay, welcome to today's meeting. No one's showing up yet, but I think Ankit is coming later on today, and maybe Jesse's coming. We have a couple of things to talk about, mainly items concerning Jesse and Ankit. So wait a little bit more, but first I'd like to talk about a couple of things, a couple of conference items. The first one is that we have a new conference coming up, and I think I talked to Jesse about this, called Collective Intelligence. So let me share my screen. And this is the homepage for Collective Intelligence. I think I pointed this out to Jesse because it's happening. It's happening both in Boston and Copenhagen, and he's living in Boston, in the Boston area, so he's close to this. And they'll have presentations at both sites. And so this is ACM, which is the Association for Computing Machinery, their Collective Intelligence Conference. So this is happening in June, and explores the impact of technology and big data on ways in which people come together to communicate, combine knowledge, and get work done. So that's it's kind of like a former. There's an area called CSCW, which is a field of human-computer interaction, and so it feeds into that type of thing. And I've been interested in that in the past, and this looks really interesting. It looks like there's a lot of stuff here that will probably be interesting to sort of look at post conference. And so this is how they have the conference set up. They start their day in Copenhagen from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. and they do the things in Copenhagen. Then there's a period of time where they're doing joint sessions, so speakers are at both sites. And then they have, later on in the evening in Boston, they have activities just in Boston. So it's a sort of distributed conference model. And so they've had this, I think this is probably going to be at MIT. They've had it at Carnegie Mellon in the past. So the topics, of course, are wide-ranging. They include human computation, social computing, wisdom of crowds, which are, I guess they say prediction markets, but it's more about collective behavior in general. Group memory and extended cognition, ethics of collective intelligence, computational models of groups, swarming and synchronicity, collective computation. So there are a whole host of topics that are going to be covered. And so Jesse, I suggested that we submit an abstract for this. And if you go to the calls page, you'll see that there is a call for extended abstracts. And so the call is for 3 pages of text plus 1 page of references. So the submission needs to be either, it could be a demo or a report of original research. And this is due when, I don't see a date on this part of, oh, here it is. Abstract deadline March 1. And so that's coming up pretty soon. And so we'll have to make a decision about this within the next week or two. Hi, Jesse. Hello? Okay, it's fine. You can hear me fine? Okay, yeah, but you can hear me, yeah. So I was talking about this collective intelligence conference that we slacked about earlier. I have my screen shared. If you can see the screen, I was recording the session, starting a recording. So This is a collective intelligence conference. The deadline is March 1st. So we'd have to make a decision on this maybe in like 1 or 2 weeks if what this is going to happen. The notification is April 1st, so you get notified then. There are travel funds available. There's it's a typical conference structure. They might extend this deadline a week or so. That often happens at conferences where you're expected to submit some sort of, basically people run out of time and they have to push the deadline back. It's almost universal. We'll see if they do it here. And then the submission format, they're templates in Word and in LaTeX. So this is basically the call. And I was pointing out that there are a lot of different topics that this conference covers. It goes from human computation to citizen science to artificial intelligence, open source intelligence and investigation, and so forth. So Jesse, did you have any ideas of what you were thinking maybe you might want to submit, or is there something you have in mind that would be suitable for this? Okay. Well, we can talk about that on Slack. But I did write up an idea here, and I'm not quite sure if this fits, but it's a adjunctive sort of approach to something diverse computational societies. So it's basically like looking at networks of agents and looking at how they take different perspectives on a common type of stimuli. So the idea would be that these networks would have some sort of computational engine, and that they'd this abstract would basically be laying out how to do this, and maybe even setting up the model a little bit. It wouldn't really be like hard results, which would be like reserved for a paper, but to come up with some different types of this idea of taking different perspectives on data. I was actually talking about this with a group of people in for the DevaWorm ML GSOC proposal, where people were talking about using data augmentation for enhancing your input data to a deep learning model. In this case, it would be more about like taking objects and transforming them in different ways, either some sort of affine transformation, which is changing the perspective and the alignment of it, versus even like taking it out of a real physical context and like looking at those different aspects of it and seeing if the agent can learn and generalize, and if they have the same representation as like other agents in the population. So I kind of wrote out some ideas here. I can work on it a little bit more, but I just worked on it yesterday just to give it a little bit of an outline. So I don't know if I have it shared with you right now, but I can share this with you later. I'll put the link in Slack, and we can, if you want to. Yeah, very interesting. Well, yeah, so you can take a look, and if that's something you want to do, then we can work on it a little bit more. And again, it's like a three-page abstract, so it doesn't need to be like refined. It's just an idea, and I've done this before for different conferences where you present an idea, and it's something that you want to show to the community. You might get feedback on it. You might get some people say, "Oh, it's a good idea. You should do this," or maybe they'll have ideas to improve upon it. So we'll revisit that. The other one I wanted to point to, another conference that's upcoming, is, and this is not going to require anyone's input in particular. It might a little bit, but it's something we've been talking about in the group. Is this OHBMX conference? So this is so last year there was a conference called Brain.tc, and it's a Twitter conference. where where you present your material on Twitter as a series of tweets. So you propose a presentation, and you then present that presentation in tweets. So let me show you what it looks like. We have an Ankit here today. Well, Ankit.
Hey.
How are you?
It's good.
Jesse says hi. Welcome.
So, when is the recordings that you sent? Not fully, but seems like you guys were talking about some A-Life conference at Montreal or something like that.
Yeah. Well, we were just going. So this week too, we're going over different conferences that are upcoming. So I was talking about this. This is something called a Twitter conference, where you submit a proposal for a talk and then you deliver it in tweets. And I was just about to show Jesse what that looks like. So we'll talk about what you were talking about in your Slack message a little bit later. But so this is what it looks like. If you have so this is the Brain TC. Like, what they would do is they'd schedule these talks for like a certain time, UTC time, so everyone could coordinate around the world, and they'd go like from different parts of the world. Would different sessions would be like different parts of the world, where you'd go to like Europe, and then you'd go to the Middle East, and then you'd go to India and East Asia, and then to Oceania, and then the North America, South America, and it would just be like when people were available, at different times that were good for paying attention, and then they'd give you a certain amount of time for your session, 15 minutes, and you'd have to craft a series of tweets that would get your idea across in that amount of time. So this was the talk that I gave last year on this, and so then you tweet to this account. There's Z, actually. Good.
Hey.
Hello, Z. Come on, join in the fun, I guess. So I was talking about this Twitter conference that I did last year. So this is the way it's set up. You do a tweet where you sort of describe what it is that you're going to talk about for this tweet, and then you can attach images. So the way this is best done is to create slides and then convert them to images, very simple slides like this, and then attach them to a tweet where you can put in like a very short description. And I think Twitter allows for like 240 characters. So you can put in the description of this and then a figure. And then you keep doing this, you thread it, they tell you how to thread the tweet so that it's, you can preserve it for later viewing. And then, so this is just where we start with this slide, we go to this slide, we go to this slide, and it kind of walks through this presentation. And, you give some information maybe about papers and about sort of your main idea. So this is a slide that I've converted into an image. And then, this just talks about the CGS model that I told you about, I think, last week. And some of you are familiar with this, but this is just walking through it. And I mentioned Google Summer of Code here. So, and then, the final slide, which is sort of a promotion for the different activities going on around this project. So, what you do is you create maybe like 8 or 9 tweets, and then you present them at 30-second intervals so that people can read it and then wait for the next one. And so my idea for this, so this is the OHBM conference, and they've rebranded it for this year. So the abstract submission, I guess, is now open. And they're going to do this again, and this is going to be on March 20th. So this is the equinox. So I guess they call it the Equinox Twitter conference now. It's still about the brain, but it's the little bit different. So, I mean, the idea would be to do this for the developmental Bradenberg vehicle stuff, and I'd put your guys' names on it, and you could come and view like the presentation. I would present it on Twitter, but we'd all be tagged in it, and we'd all have we'd have to come up, I guess, with now that we have the paper written, I think it's easier to say what the content should look like. So maybe I guess the deadline probably isn't for a couple weeks. So I was thinking of writing an abstract, bringing it to the meeting next week, and then we could all take a look and group edit the thing, and then we'll submit it. And then when the time comes, we can go through the materials that we have and decide what we want to put in the content for the presentation, sort of write up a draft, and then that day it would be presented. They'd have to schedule you for a certain time, but it would be presented and then it would be available.
Yeah, sounds good. So basically, the idea should be to we have our work done already, and just to publicize that in conferences and journals, right?
Yeah. So we have our manuscript, and that's pretty big. So people aren't going to sift through that. Just say, "Oh, here's a manuscript." Usually, people will announce those sort of things on Twitter. Say, "This is a manuscript. Read it." This gives us an opportunity to have a whole thread where we kind of walk through some of the elements of it, and just kind of maybe give some visuals so that people can see what's going on. So like in this one, we have I've attached some diagrams, and it kind of explains the basic idea of what it's all about, and then we have like references in the tweet, and then we have links, so you can link to something. So I mean, it gives you like a really nice guided tour of the thing, and I hope that we have the manuscript done by then. We can have it on a preprint server, and we can just link right to that, so people at the end will say, "This is the group. These are where we're located, and then this is the manuscript. You could read it, and then maybe provide feedback."
Yeah, so it sounds good. And also, like on the manuscript thing, I made some changes of whatever you wrote in my part. So, and also I feel like I should make some more changes. So actually, I'm very short of time these days because I have an exam tomorrow morning. So, but just before the call, I saw the manuscript and made some changes, and I'm willing to do some more changes in that. So just hold on for the manuscript for at least 2 or 3 days before we.
Our deadline I think is March 1st. At least that's for right now. That's what I'd like to shoot for in terms of having everything done. But Jesse and I were doing some back and forth, I think, last night, or at least like sort of asynchronously. So I'll check it out, but we'll revisit that in a minute. So that's, but I wanted to go through that Twitter conference thing with people to make sure that they're aware of that. That would be going on, and then next week we'll look at we'll go through an abstract, and then we'll have a little bit better idea of how it's going to work. But it should be fun. I think it should be pretty good. There's a pretty good attendance at these things. So, another thing I wanted to point people to is
I would just say, I'm definitely. I think that's a good way to set up. I think the Twitter conference is very good, and I think that'll be a very good sort of. I do wait for the manuscript is before that, but I think that'll be a good. I like the idea of using that as a preprint way to get comment on a preprint at that time. I think that's really good.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good method of promotion. To have it like pretty new when we have the conference. So it seems like it's like you're hot off the presses. It's kind of that anticipation thing. So, so that's upcoming. Then I wanted to point to another conference that happened recently, just to make people aware of these things. And it's called Dynamics Days. And so this is a little bit different than like the computer science conferences. This is about dynamics, and they've had this for years, like maybe 20 years now running. And I have attended a couple of these in different locations, and it's interesting. It's actually more about like complex systems and dynamical systems. And the idea is that you have a bunch of people interested in dynamical systems. So a lot of physicists, but also some computer scientists and chemists and people like that. And they do this. They do these presentations on chaos and nonlinear dynamics. Mathematicians are also involved, and so this one was put on in Hartford, Connecticut, and the organizing committee is there. And let's see if they have. The reason I bring it up is because it happened recently, earlier this month or last month now, and they have a lot of interesting stuff at this conference. So let me put a link to this conference site in the chat. And I'm trying to give you a flavor of the types of conferences that exist. That's why I'm doing this. If you want to check that out, if you're interested, that'd be interesting to see what people were doing at this conference. So, no way they don't have it pop. Oh, they do. They have it populated with the schedule. I think it's in PDF form, but you basically can look through the schedule. So, they have keynotes, and I think they just have keynotes. I think that's the way it's usually structured. So this is a nice conference. Just, it's just all in one room, and you have people going in sequence. So you have people doing cardiac dynamics, people modeling diseases. Then there's like pure mathematics, where they're looking at they're analyzing cycle oscillators, coupled oscillator networks, effects of the spatial structure of the hive in recruiting process for honeybee colonies, which is kind of a probably pretty interesting topic. So they bounce back and forth between different topics, both theoretical and applied. But there was also recently a recap of this conference. So this is something someone who attended, a PhD candidate attended, and wrote this blog post on. So they talked a little bit about the contents and what was interesting to them in the conference. They have they have the regular keynotes. They have flash and poster sessions. I guess the flash talks are short talks. So yeah, they have a lot of things, and I'll give you the link to this blog post as well. So that's one thing. If you ever go to a conference and you want to get some exposure for your own writing and for the conference, you could write a blog post. Just take it from your notes and write it out. I've done this a couple times for different conferences in the past, where you recap the conference. It helps you kind of think through what you've attended. It helps you digest everything that you see, because a lot of times if you go to conferences, you see a lot of things, and there are a lot of interesting things, but then you forget about it down the road. And so one way to kind of synthesize it in your mind is to write out a blog post highlighting what you thought was good, maybe something that deserves follow-up. And so I definitely think, if you're going to go to a conference, if you're not just meeting people there, the next best thing to do is to, maybe present, or just to learn things from what's going on. It's always a good opportunity to learn a lot of things that you wouldn't otherwise learn. So that's it for the conferences. And if you see any conferences, actually, it'd be nice to review them in this session. So Jesse says, yes, that reminds me, I have to finish the one I made for the Envision conference. Yeah, so that would be good if you had a blog post on the Envision conference. And we can, if you put it out on your own blog, or I can host it for you if you want. I have a blog, just whatever works for you. And, it's really just, I think it's also for other people's benefit to, see what went on at a certain conference. But I think it also is a very good learning tool. So, yeah, if anyone has any conferences that they see happening or that they're interested in, maybe they won't attend it, but you want to, talk about in the session, please let me know. We'll keep doing this and just getting a flavor for the different conferences that are out there. Okay. So now.
Yeah.
Oh.
I would say just one or two things about that. I mentioned the New England Complex Systems Institute hosting a training, and I didn't get to go to that, but there are some things around that. They do like a lot of things about complex systems and dynamics that are very interesting. There was like I think it's a HIII, or the Artificial Intelligence Institute. They're doing something in New York, I think, but I forgot if that conference already happened or is happening soon. And I really want to try to go to it, but I don't think that's going to happen. But if anybody is going, or to go to that conference, I'll kind of note that one because there's a lot of different. HIII is huge, and there's a bunch of different subgroups related to things. So that reminds me I should look into that to see what its status is. The only other conference that comes to my mind right now is I am sort of volunteering. Last year I participated in a conference called it's like NYC WIC, but it's New York Celebration of Women in Computing. And it's a very, very good conference for everybody. I was actually really impressed by it. It's a small conference that is local, sort of to where I am in upstate New York. But it actually really, really, really good in terms of sort of like mentorship in the field, but then also had actually really good technical topics. So I'm volunteering with them this year in some capacity. I was actually a reviewer for some of the proposals to the conference, and I may be helping with them on the conference day. But that's going to be in April, and I'll be here. I don't think any of you guys will be able to go to it. It's going to be in upstate New York too. But that's actually there's I guess for other people, and forgive me if you guys know this, but there are like big conferences like Society for Neuroethics or AIII, and there's kind of mid-range conferences, and some of the small conferences are really nice too, even if they're sort of open-ended, because like New York, the NYC WIC, it's kind of its name is branded towards maybe diversity-oriented stuff, but it's really good to check them out sometimes because a lot of times. Or, it depends. Every conference is different, but sometimes they will offer very unique opportunities and more personal opportunities to do certain things. Like I actually presented a collaborative work I did on bias in artificial intelligence last year, and a few other people did it as well. So some conferences have quite a bit to offer. So I'm definitely, if anybody finds, I'm definitely always looking for those opportunities, so definitely share them here if you come across one. That's it.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so I mean, it can be something that is local to you, but maybe other people won't attend, or, it could be something that's, a big conference that you might not attend, but might have their sessions online, like NeuroSim. That was always very, informative because you can look at the sessions afterwards. So that's, it's very good to like get involved at least superficially in these conferences to see what's going on. So now I want to do one more thing. So we're going to do a paper by Jesse. I just wanted to briefly get his thoughts on it. And then we have some things that Ankit wanted to talk about, and then we'll go to the manuscript. So this paper that Jesse sent on Slack, actually to the OpenWorm Slack, and this is natural selection finds natural gradient. Yeah. So this is something that you might want to present in the future.
Yeah, I have not fully read it, but just the abstract and the concept sounds very much like things that I've been interested in.
Yeah, I think it's the free energy principle, growing out of that. I think. Correct.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I've heard like I was loosely involved in like a free energy principle study group at one point, and I'm not saying I particularly understand it very well, but I was interested in how it spoke about what I wrote. The quotes in the Slack, I think they're from the abstract, are basically just saying the nature between state changes. That was interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely. I don't know much about the free energy principle either. Just kind of like, I get the sense it's a sort of dynamical systems view of the brain, which is actually older than like Carl Friston. There were
Yes.
a number of people like Walter Freeman who wrote a very large amount of stuff in the past on like using like EEG to look at dynamics in the brain. That there were state transitions based on like certain things going on in cognition. So I mean, this is again like Carl Friston's take on it, but I think it's definitely it would be a really interesting paper to review. Maybe we'll set it up for we can, like I said, we can do presentations offline as well. Like we can meet at some point where it's good time for you, and we can record it, and then we can share it in the session. That works.
Also, I think it's like super brand new, so I'm curious to dive into it and see what the latest take on things are.
Yeah.
From him,
yeah, definitely. I think that would be good for this group, and then maybe we can mention it in the other group as a something they can look at later. But I think definitely it's worth doing. So
okay.
Then so Ankit is been waiting patiently here for the things. So we were going to talk about the FQXISA and the GSOC proposal. So why don't we pull up the GSOC proposal first? And this is again the GSOC proposal. This is the same one that's up on the Neurostar site. So you wanted to mention a couple things about it?
Yeah, so like I just wanted to have some say from your side that like how that this project is associated with the breaking the vehicle idea. So I read read whatever is there. I could relate to it in some ways, but I wanted some feedback from your side. How could I like build upon on this given my work that I've done? And I wrote something on the NeuroStars also that I would be interested in doing.
Oh, a new comment.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll take a look at the comment. But like what I can say about it now is that so this is the way way I envision this is that we have the vehicles that we've been working on, and you have, in your case, it's you've kind of designed these vehicles based around the sort of the templates that that Bradenberg proposed. So you have like hardwired phenotypes, as it were, and they're just they're fixed. You have like different vehicles that you boot up. So this would be a little bit different. This would be like where you would have, you could do the whole network as a single network, or you could break the network apart into nodes. But the idea would be to take those networks and implement these contextual geometric structure kernels on either each node, or it could be on the entire network. So the idea would be that each node would have one of these kernels on them. So like if there's an input coming into a node, this kernel would classify the content and then have an output, which would be then different than you would otherwise have. So, and you can do this creatively. You could create you could run information in one of these networks, in one of these vehicle nervous systems, and then classify the output of that into different categories. And you'd have to read more about we could talk more specifically about the CGS kernel and how it might map to that, in more detail, maybe on Slack, more specific questions about it. But the idea would be to have this kernel on top of the vehicle. So you'd have the vehicle's network, the neural network in the vehicle, and then on top of that you'd have the CGS kernel, which is basically classifying inputs in different ways. It could be, sensory input classifications. It could be behavioral classifications, different things like that. And the idea would be then it would be a little bit different than your typical Bradenburg vehicle output, in that it would actually maybe move it closer to some of the behaviors that Bradenburg mentions. Like he mentions, and we have the table in the paper on different vehicle designs having some correspondence to a different type of behavior, like friendliness or aggression or things like that. With the CGS kernel, we can actually make that more explicit. We can say, if you have this type of network, we can put this type of classification system on top of it, so that we're sort of maybe using that information to select for a certain type of behavior. That the vehicle has a representation of different types of behaviors or different types of stimuli. And so we talked last meeting, we talked about how Bradenburg vehicles don't really have a lot of representation in them. It's just a bunch of nodes in a network, and it's producing some output that's emergent, and we try to understand it. In this case, we're actually putting a representation on top of the vehicle's neural network. We're saying this network is behaving, but it's operating, it's basically doing work. It's basically classifying things. It's doing something. It has a representation that it's sort of moving towards, and then it has a way to understand what its activity is. So it's kind of like a cognitive representation of what's going on in the vehicle. And then the idea would be that it could operate on that cognitive representation in different ways. So it could maybe think rather than just being reactive. I mean, it would fit into what you're doing. It'd be a little bit of, you'd have to sort of move in a little bit different direction to incorporate that, but it wouldn't be too bad. I think you could definitely, you have the infrastructure in place to make, wouldn't take that much work to, implement.
Step into that kind of thing.
What was that?
I also feel the same way. I have the idea of Gutenberg vehicles, and if I read about that CGS thing in more detail, I could build upon that in a better way. So yeah, so that's why I expressed my interest on the NeuroStars. So and that day you told me that just go through this project. So I went through that. Have some lack of time recently, but would try to get on this and maybe talk to you in person about this thing. Yeah.
Definitely, yeah, and I think the deadline is a ways off, so just keep thinking about it and fielding questions, and then you can put together a proposal that's pretty good. I mean, like I said, I don't think it'll take that much more conceptual. It's not a conceptual break from where you are with your interest in vehicles. It's just that it's sort of an additional. I think it's an add-on essentially. And so the idea would be that people would work with the vehicles that we have, the different types of models, and adding on this another layer of maybe a layer representation, if you want to think of it that way, and then you'd have this sort of I mean, it would be definitely different from what anyone else is doing, on the vehicle's front. So it would be an innovation, definitely.
Nice.
So, any more on that, or?
We can move on to the manuscript thing.
Okay. Well, yeah, we can talk about the FQXI essay too before that, but just wanted to briefly talk about that. So this is the essay. Ankit, did you have any thoughts on it, or?
I haven't actually gone into it. I should go through it like this week or something.
Yeah. So, I mean, just updates on this is that, I've been kind of working on it myself, kind of going through, smoothing out bullet points. So, I mean, this is a thing where if you see something that's ridiculous, or if you think it's like there's something you want to like move in a certain direction, you can make edits on GitHub, or you can add in comments here.
I was going to ask how we should go about doing the edits. I guess we can just do them on GitHub like a normal like make a commit. Is that what you were thinking?
Yeah. So the way you do this is just if you can make a commit or a pull request on this document, so you fork this. This is QXI essays, and so you would just fork it and then make a pull request. You just basically make your changes and then make a pull request, just like you would with code. I mean, it is code; it's Markdown, but you would just go in and make a pull request, and then I'd review it, and we put it into this. And you have all the prior versions in here. If you didn't know that, you can review prior versions in GitHub. And so, it's pretty easy to, make edits that way. And just, I'll get the diff when I get the pull request, so it's easy to see.
Yeah.
And then, and again, like I said, if it's something you don't feel comfortable putting in, you can leave it as a comment, and then we can review it together, or I can put it in, that's basically the way we'll do it. So I mean, just like I haven't worked on it a lot recently, but it's I'm just kind of like plodding along on it, just spending a little bit of time every so often on it, and
When is it due by?
I think March, in the middle of March, like March 15th or something. So it's a ways off, but I think like I said, these type of projects, you work on them a little bit at a time, and it gets there.
Yes.
You don't want to. I mean, you can do it all at once, but it's unrealistic sometimes to do that.
Yeah. So, but it's good that we have like deadlines, and the way things are going on with me, I'm in need of deadlines.
Yeah.
So that things are important. Yeah.
Well, I think managing deadlines is a good skill to master. Like if you can figure out how to do multiple things and meet all the deadlines, that's always a good skill to have.
It's like the major grad school deadline the major grad school skill that I'm like attempting to build and hearing other people talk about all the time. Especially for like research and academic stuff, like you have to, the managing of all of that is. I'm still getting used to it, but it's it's its own it's an art, I guess.
Yeah,
maybe a science.
I mean, you just have to be organized, and you have to kind of keep a record of it. Like, so what I usually do is have like a record of deadlines and sort of what to do. I mean, that's why they have like Trello and tools like that where you put milestones up.
I recently started using Asana because that lets you have a bunch of like micro. You can be very fine-grained or be very large-grained. But Kanban more than Trello too. Which you can do it on Asana actually too.
Yeah. So so like that's the thing. It always look like interesting to me. So if I go through it once, I'm sure that I would come up with some idea or something like that.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, please read it and think about it, and then please feel free to submit a pull request on that. then the last thing we have to talk about today is the manuscript. So here it is, and comment here. Okay, that's a link to Asana. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is our manuscript. Again, the title, the abstract, introduction, and where were we? And Ankit said he had added some things. So,
So in the method part, I have added something today.
Okay.
Go down into the method section.
Yeah. It's still loading the paper, so it's going to take a while to come up here. Okay. So this is the part that Jesse had.
I guess I'll say about my stuff now. While waiting, I didn't do that much this week, but I've been trying to do like the edits as suggestions.
Yeah,
I think that's a nice thing to do. You can change it in the upper right. Because even I went back and rewrote something. You know, I rewrote a little bit of what I wrote before, and I didn't have a lot of time to put it down on paper. But I feel like I think by the end of next week, I should be pretty much set with most of my contributions. I definitely embodied cognition part is there. It's just writing it in the right way and being concise in that way. And then I do want to kind of went through the paper once, made a few copy edits to like half of it, and I think my plan of attack going forward is finishing the embodied cognition part, finishing the regulation part, and then going through, I guess, the conclusion or discussion area again as like a really solid review. I don't know, review or just like of that, and then go through it again. I'm comfortable like doing general copy editing in the paper, so I'll go through that again, just to like for grammar or whatever. But I feel like that's something that I know we kind of set our deadline as March 1st or something like that, but I think I'll definitely be done with my part. I think it's a reasonable deadline to be done with that by next week with my stuff, and then we can have a couple more weeks to. I don't know how much more everybody else wants to write. It looks like pretty much everybody else is set. I know Ankit has some things he wants to do for his stuff and adjust that, but Ziyi and Stefan, I think, from what I understand, are pretty much set, so I think we're on task, on schedule.
Yeah, I think so. I think, I was looking at this yesterday. I think it's coming along nicely. So yeah, if you just want to go and, go through these different parts that you mentioned, and just kind of like, make sure it's what you want, and then, it looks pretty good to me. There's a bit more, I don't think we need to do that a huge amount of like writing. I think it's at this point it's mainly like kind of refining what we have here.
Yeah.
So this part they'll definitely finish, and then some of these parts could be refined more. And then if you have suggestions for refining them, put them in, suggest them. Then again, the methods are pretty much in place, although we probably want to go through them again just to make sure that they're exactly what we want. And then, so I think we've gone through that. Oh, yeah, here's your part.
So here I added like I removed the deep learning part because that is not done. That was originally the idea, but it is not in place, so it's not a good idea to write that. So is this method for swarm intelligence using BVs, and I wrote something like what's the idea and where it's taken from. And then there is some changes in the I think you confused with the mathematical formula that was there, so I made some changes here also.
Okay.
And Yeah, so I might just like check out things again. What's there in my documentation and what's written here, and I might get back to you. So I should do it tomorrow, and then by end of next week, just like Jesse said, we should be done with the fine tuning or anything.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is the part here. So this is the part that this is the results part. It's we call it results, but it's not really. But this is just kind of the screenshots, and then the motor unit, judgment unit. Oh, that's from the other one. Okay, this is BV collectives. Goes through here. Here's the table I told you about. Vehicle kinematics. Then we go into the use cases, and then that's the cumulative classification part. So you might want to look this over because this is more again like exploratory, and this is kind of where I kind of like wanted to put the deep learning stuff. I think it's actually good for a use case, but just to write it as like a future.
Yeah.
A future
So,
direction.
like in last meeting also, I told about like not because that thing is not done. That can be like shifted to future issues or something like that. So
Yeah.
I might add on to that also if I get time.
Yeah. And then so then limitations and future issues. I think that's more or less done. I mean, we can probably mention some other things in there, like I don't know. I mean, I'll look at and probably adds a little bit more there, but I think, like I said, most of this is going to be like refinement at this point. So, and so that's good. I think we're on track for that. And again, feel free to go and look at it if you want, and then let me know when you are done with your section, or if you have any edits, you can put a message in Slack or something, and make sure that I'm aware of it. Okay, so we got some messages. Jesse put a link for the Asana Kanban board where he mentions it. Then Z has a comment. I checked my part and I think there is some redundancy with the learning function part. There's probably some redundancy. If you can point to where you think it's redundant, just highlight it, and then we can either combine it into what's already there or delete it. That's fine. Also, I'm going to clarify the environment part a little more. I'll do it today. I look forward to it, Z. Thank you. I haven't talked to you all meeting, so I wanted to make sure do you have anything to add? Do you have any comments or anything you wanted to mention? You can just put it in the chat. So, so that's good. I think we're coming along in the paper, and like I said, we'll try to finish it up in this next month, and then March 1st, we'll try to maybe get it out, and then we're going to try for this Twitter conference to do a presentation on it, and this will be the paper is hot off the presses. This is if you want to comment on it, or if you want to learn more, go to this paper. Here are the people involved, so people will get a sense of who's involved, and it should be pretty good. I think it'll be a good exposure, and then so we'll go over all that in later meetings.
Yeah.
Can you get away? Which conference? Oh, the Twitter conference. Let me see.
So you can. I think.
Okay, this one here. Mm-hmm. And this is a conference. It's usually a lot of brain imaging stuff and some brain, dynamics, but they also, have computational models, and so it's basically neuroscience conference. So.
Mm-hmm. So the idea now is to approach send our idea to these conferences, and also printing this to a journal is also remains there, right?
Yeah, we're gonna do this step by step. We'll do the preprint, and then we'll do this conference, and then we talked about submitting to different journals. So, you submit to a journal, and then they review it, and they're perfectly okay with preprints because it gives, some. Usually, a lot of times I've actually had papers where they've been posted as a preprint, and they get a lot of buzz, like they get a lot of reads, and then I can point to that in the submission letter and say, this has already gotten a bunch of reads on a preprint server, so we think there's some interest. Makes the case for why this paper is important, and then it helps you along. Maybe people can also give you comments about what's wrong with it or how it can be improved, and you can also incorporate that. So I mean, it's always good to, I like that kind of model where you debut it as a preprint and then you kind of move on and you do other things with it, and you finally can maybe get it into a journal, and then it's so yeah. And like I said, if you have a journal you think it might be a really good fit for, let us know in the meeting. Otherwise we'll maybe in the March-April time frame we'll discuss more about that, where it would go, or we're going to actually submit it.
Yeah, so my idea now is to because the coding part of my part is almost stagnant because I haven't made any changes to that. Mainly it's documentation and writing my part to the paper. So I just want to leave it to that and do a proper documentation for the paper and move forward with the GSOC idea, what we have for this year, the project 16. So I would move in that direction and just complete the documentation of whatever the work has been done. Yeah.
Okay, well that sounds good. Well, okay, it's the top of the hour, so thanks for attending again today. And again, if you have any questions, you can do it in Slack or email or whatever. And hope you have a good week. See you later. Take care.
Yep, thank you, everybody.